Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to the Lord.
Ted Turner is the founder of CNN and also Turner Classic Movies. And once in an interview, Ted Turner was asked to define life. And he said that life is like a B movie. You don't want to leave in the middle, but you don't want to see it again. Now, maybe he was trying to be funny, or maybe he was describing a feeling that we all have from time to time. A feeling of not being very happy with the life that we are living. So sometimes we get a little cynical, we get a little gloomy, and we get a little grumpy about life. Don't want to leave in the middle, but I don't want to see it again. Now, the Bible is actually a little bit more positive, a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more hopeful about life than Mr. Turner is. And that hopefulness is reflected in this morning's reading from the prophet Ezekiel. It's a glorious passage, and it has a glorious image in it. And the image is that of the valley of the dry bones. And Ezekiel is asked, can these bones live again? And then Ezekiel sees the Spirit of God move over the bones, and the bones come together. The bones rise up, the thigh bone connected to the hip bone, when they hear the word of the Lord. Now let me tell you a little bit of the history behind this passage. Israel has been conquered by Babylon. Israel has been taken into exile, away from Jerusalem, away from her spiritual home, away from the temple. And in Babylon, Israel has no army, she has no political clout, she has no power. And Ezekiel, along with everybody else who's in exile with him, wonders if they will ever see their homeland again. Or is this it? this the end of the road? Will Israel die in exile? Will Babylon be her tomb? Now that's the history of it. But if you don't care very much for my little history lesson, you can also read this passage as if it were a poem. Because you see, you and I also have our visions of the valley of the dry bones. You and I have experiences of our own of living in exile. You and I know from time to time what it's like to live in the topography of hopelessness. There's a valley of the dry bones in some of our relationships, relationships that are lifeless because all of the love, all of the intimacy, all of the tenderness has dried up. There's a valley of dry bones in some of our social life. Organizations and groups and gatherings where once there was life and there was energy and there was vitality. And now there is no sense of purpose, no driving mission, no spirit. We know the valley of dry bones when our days become something to endure, something to get through, something to chalk up. We know the valley of the dry bones when we realize that there is no cause, that there is no commitment, that there is no person in our lives whose place we would gladly take, even if it meant that we had to suffer. So we too stand like Jesus at the threshold of a tomb. But unlike Jesus, we cannot weep because all of our tears have dried up. Dem bones, dem dry bones. Can these bones live again? Now, for the cynics, for the skeptics, for the pessimists who are in our lives in great numbers these days, the answer is no. No, they cannot live again. They cannot live again because all of life is lighting its way to a bony and dusty death. But for us, for the people of God, exiled though we might be, our vision of the valley of dry bones calls us to hope. Hope. Hope in the Spirit of God. Hope in the Lord, who is the Lord and giver of life. Can these bones live again? And for the people of God, the answer is yes. You bet that they can live again. Because we believe with every bone in our body reality that God promises that there is always a way. God promises that there is always a way to turn it around. No matter how rotten, no matter how dry, no matter how bony that valley is, just hear the word of the Lord when he says with tears running down his cheeks, I am the resurrection, and I am life. Can these bones live again? You bet they can. You just watch them dry bones come back to life when the Spirit of God moves. And you live in the spirit of hope, in the power of resurrection, in the joy of being alive. Amen.
Oh